Hello, welcome to American Christian or Christian American. My name is Sean Legacy, and I am the creator and the host of American Christian or Christian American. This is the first episode of what I hope will be going on for a while. Why the title? I'm going to leave some of that up to you as a mystery, but I will say that you could think of it as where's your purpose? And the rest of it, I'm going to leave for you to discover as we study. I may address it farther down the road. But I want you to understand that what we are doing here is trying to look at the truth and history. And where did I get all this from? Where does it come from? Well, I'm 59 years old. We're in 2025, and in June, I will be 60 years old. I came to the church when I was 16 years old, April 18th, 1982. Yes, that's ways back there. I was a newborn baby when it comes down to being a Christian. And I was, like most people are, I was excited for one thing, but I was just taking what everybody said in, and they knew the facts. I didn't know anything. And I thought a little for myself, but for the most part, I just took in facts. And that's what babies do, both physically and when you're learning something new like Christianity. However, as we grow, we start to experiment and to learn, just like children do. So what did I do? I started studying, and I started seeing some things that didn't seem right to me. But I was still too young. I kept thinking about it. I kept praying about it. I didn't know what to do. I'd also been brought up with issues, self-esteem issues and traumas and all those different things. So those affected my ability to be confident in what I studied. But throughout time, I started to have more and more assurance of what I believed I was on the right track. I wanted to do something about it. Write a book, possibility. Hadn't got to the point of doing a podcast yet. But even then, I believe God held me back because he had more things to put into the puzzle. So even though I haven't changed my focus on the things which I believe the center of everything is about God's love for us and our love for each other. I believe that in general, we do not understand what it means to have relationships with each other or have a relationship with God. That most Christians are very, very lacking in all of those areas. But I began to see underlying causes that had a lot to do with the way we think about things as Americans, as people in the world. But I'm really focusing on people as Americans. But in order to discover those things, we have to go back and look at history. We have to understand that all of these things have impacted the way we do things, the way we think about things. Otherwise, we'll never get to the truth. You see, we all have different cultural norms and different things that we accept. We're born into a society. That society sets our social norms. And we interpret not only from what our parents tell us, but from society tells us and everything, our entire reality. If we get older and we start to question that reality and we start to look up things and understand things, we can broaden our understanding. Perhaps we can be better for the culture, the social norms, and help improve it. But also for Christianity, we have to do that. We cannot just go on and just accept what we're told. Now, I'm not saying that you don't listen to your parents, because they have many wise things for them, but they're human. Just like everybody else, they make mistakes. So what they taught you is your responsibility to study for yourself. But even if they were capable of being just about perfect, it's their faith. They've taught you these things. Now it's time for you, as you grow up, to confirm these things by studying for yourself and making it your own relationship with God and your own faith. And if there are differences, because your parents are imperfect, just like you are, you can make corrections on those things. Perhaps you can give them some insight. Preachers, very knowledgeable of the Bible, know a great deal of things. You listen to them because you should. However, no preacher is infallible, and some are dishonest. But I'm just saying, I'm going with the idea that just infallibility, that we are responsible to study for ourselves to see if what they're teaching is correct. And that's how we grow. There's a reason why we are put together. Yes, the ones who've been around longer and studied and have wisdom, they are the ones that we look towards to guide us. But it should not be like a puppet on a string. It should be like they're giving us insight and we study what they say and what they do. And then we either reaffirm it or we understand differently. God means to touch all of our lives as individuals. He doesn't mean just to have one person who leads us by the nose. So, another thing we have to understand is that from the very beginning, once mankind sinned, well, they screwed up. And they continuously screwed up throughout biblical history. The main problem is that we all need power. Now, some would say, what? Yes, we do. God created us to need power, His power. The power that animates us, the power that sustains us, the power that keeps us going. Without His power, we are nothing. But people decide, as sinners, we all mix this up to a point. We go for God's power, but we get a little human power, and the balance is not exactly right, and that's why we have problems with our decisions in life. But others choose to go after human power with a vengeance. They want to feel that power. The problem is, when it's not God's power and it's human power, is that power hurts other people. It creates somebody who dominates other people. It's discriminatory. It's dehumanization. It's full of greed and selfishness. And so that's how many people in this world achieve power. People like Elon Musk and other people like that who have a huge amount of power. They don't care about other people. They care about the power they have. Then there's other people who aren't really up to going out and being the Elon Musk or the other people that are ahead and lusting for power. They get their power by following somebody else who has that power, and they feel part of a group, and that's how they get their power. The group focuses on the leader, and the group energizes the group to have power within them. But none of that will make you be who you're supposed to be. Only God can make you that way. That's why I'm doing this. Because a lot of people, also people within churches, who go and sing, listen to preaching, listen to teaching, pray, the church itself, not all of them, but many churches today, are following humanistic power. And God's power is not there. God's salvation is not there. You cannot go to the left with God ungodliness and humanistic power and go to the right with God at the same time. You're going to go one way or the other. You can't do both. You might go this way and make some mistakes and look back over your shoulder, so to speak. But if you're ultimately going to follow the world and its power, you can sing as many songs as you want to. You can praise God as much as you want to. You can listen to as many sermons, teach sermons, preach, or listen to lessons and teach lessons. If you are following the power of the world, you are not following God. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all these things. So what are we going to start with? We're going to start with the beginning. I mean, things started wrong from the beginning. Or should I say, what I'm going to talk about isn't necessarily what started wrong in the beginning, as opposed to what people have said about the beginning. Who were the first people? Well, we know them by name. Mr. Adam, Miss Eve, the first family, the first lady, and the first man. Those two were the people that were created for all of humanity. Everyone. Everybody came from them. There was not a second or third creation. It was only one creation, Adam and Eve. All the genetics of every single person existed within those two people and passed on to their children, and ultimately after the flood, it was carried on by Noah and his three sons, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Then all the world came from them. So every one of us came from there. There is only one race, the human race. There is no other creation. In fact, we are like 99% identical. It's only that small percentage that makes us different. There is no other race. You cannot have interracial marriage. You cannot interracial date. You cannot have biracial children because you're only one race. Unless you're Lois Lane dating Clark Kent, aka Superman, you cannot be in an interracial, biracial situation. You might have different ethnicities, you might have different skin tones, but we are all the same race. Now, I know I'm already ticking some people off, but I would encourage you to listen, because no matter what, if you listen to me, You don't have to, you are not forced to accept me in what I say. And I don't expect you to anyway. I expect you to research and look it up for yourself. So we're going to look at some things and we're going to talk about some things. And I hope you stay with me. Now, just a second here, we're going to start looking up some different evidences and talking about it. Okay, so we're going to be looking at several different documents here and to go along with what we're talking about. This document here is a simple one here, but it talks about the invention of race. This history special traces the development of racial and racist ideas from the ancient world when there was no notion of race, as historians Neil Irvin Painter puts it, up to the foundations of the United States as fundamentally a nation and for a white people, despite all the men are created equal, language of the Declaration of Independence. In other words, this is just looking at the idea that race, the concept of races, is an invention. There is no such thing as multiple races. There is only one race, the human race. And we'll go on a little bit more and talk a little more in a minute about that. But there is only one race. People invented that so they would have the ability to be racist and to control other people and to degrade and dehumanize people. This is actually Fox News on here. It talks about whites genetically weaker than blacks, study finds. White Americans are both genetically weaker and less diverse than their black counterparts. A Cornell University-led study finds. Analyzing the genetic makeup of 20 Americans of European ancestry and 15 African Americans, researchers found that the former showed less variation among 10,000 tested genes than did the latter, which was expected. They also found that Europeans had many more possible harmful mutations than did African Americans, which was a surprise. Since we tend to think of the European population as quite large, we did not expect to see a significant difference in the distribution of natural and deleterious variation between the two populations. In other words, what they're talking about here, if you go down, that Europeans actually descended from a very small group of people. Okay, so only a few families would have produced all of Europe. A few families that left the continent of Africa. So white people have a much less diversity than African counterparts. Okay? Now, let's go on to the next area here. This is a document here. Let's go up to the top. National Public Library of Medicine. And this was on the genome, race and genetics versus race in genetics. It was conducted with the Genome Project, studying the human genome. And so social scientists have long understood race to be a social category invented to justify slavery, and evolutionary biologists know that social construct racial categories do not align with our biological understanding of genetic variation. The completion of the Human Genome Project in 2003 confirmed that humans are 99.9% identical at the DNA level, and there is no genetic basis for race. So see, race was invented, it was a lie, in order to dehumanize people. We are just about exactly the same. It is only 0.1% that makes up our physical differences, especially like skin tone colors, eye colors, hair colors. The variances are so small because human beings are, for the most part, identical. If we were a different race, we would have much more variance within our genes, and we don't. We all came from the same people. In other words, Adam and Eve, whatever they look like, created everybody descended from Adam and Eve. And of course, it narrowed down when we got down to the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But nevertheless, it still goes back to Adam and Eve. So when we get into here in this area, definitions of these latter terms vary wide. Genetic race has been viewed as a result of human migration and genetic isolation, leading to development of distinct populations that share DNA as a result of common descent. While the terms genetic race and biological race have been used interchangeably, goes down here. Let's see what. So again, it says right in here, the genetics are insufficient to use the term race to describe people because there is no biological reason to call people different races. This was something we used because we wanted to separate people. We wanted to put them into categories. See, when people are put into categories, it's easier for us to say that category of people is less intelligent. That category of people is more violent. They're more sexually whatever. That's where if we put people into a group and say they're a different race, we can lie about them all we want in order to gain power and control. A lot of people would just follow along with what you say because they don't look up for themselves. Now, to understand a little bit more, we talked about Adam and Eve. Everybody came from there. Let's look at this document here. Now, to be clear, there are a lot of different genes, and I've heard about 16 different genes that go into how melanin works in the body. However, this document here simplifies it for us to understand a little bit easier. It's going to use two differences to explain how all of us are different. In other words, it is using A, B, B. What they're going to do is the capital letters represent high levels of melanin in the body, which causes darker pigmentation. It's going to use lower letters, non-capitals, to represent no melanin or very low melanin in the body, representing very light-skinned people. So if a male and female in each group produced a child in a combination of AA and BB and AA and BB, they would have a capital A, a small a capital B, and a small b. And this person would be medium brown. If two people carrying this got married and reproduced their children, they would have a wide variety of skin colors. So in other words, if two medium brown people were to marry, their children could be several different pigmentations. They wouldn't necessarily be all the same. They could have some darker children, some lighter children, some that are right along with where they are. The choices are open. There could be a plethora of different possibilities along that spectrum. So if Adam and Eve were both middle brown, they would have produced children of a wide range of skin tones. Suddenly, all this becomes us believing one race doesn't seem so complicated. All right. So if you have somebody here who has all this AABB small letters, you're talking about somebody who has a very, very fair skin, somebody who cannot produce melanin, and so their skin can burn very, very easy. If you got somebody here on the other end of the spectrum, that's all they have. They don't have any low letters. They're going to be the darkest complected people in the world. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're very dark complected, or very light complected, or somewhere in between. God loves all of us and created all of us. What we're trying to do here is talk about how the facts work, and so it's better understand history and what has been leading about history. So, if you have two people who marry who have these capital letters on the very dark side of the pigmentation, their children will all be very dark, just like them. If you get two people who marry along this who have that, they're going to have the low letters are going to have very, very light skinned children, and they're not going to be able to, they can't produce anything else. But if they marry somebody who, say, we're talking about this capital A, capital B, balance, so to speak, that person is medium brown. Well, comes in sets of 4 throughout the thing. There could be somebody who has a capital letter in there out of several sets of 4, which would vary the amount of melanin, but they'd still be Caucasian, but they may be able to tan. So if a person who can tan some marries somebody who can't tan at all, the children are still going to be Caucasian, but there could be a variance. They could go towards the side where the skin is really fair and they can't produce any melanin at all, or to the point where a person can produce a certain amount of melanin and tolerate some sun exposure. All right. So the only people here that could be the first people are medium brown people. That's the only people that could. They're the only ones that could produce children of varying skin colors. Now, it doesn't mean that they had a Caucasian child and then they had a Chinese child and all that. That didn't happen instantly. They were talking about variations in African appearance. People who were what we consider black or brown people, but here medium brown people, and there would be variances. In order to get all the different people of the world, there would have to be several generations. And not only that, as long as these people stayed together like before the flood, they would be intermarrying back and forth, and so the variances wouldn't be that big. It would take a certain small group of people going off by themselves, like after the Tower of Babel, in order to be isolated for these different people to appear on the earth. Now let's just go with some logic too. God made the first people, and he put them into an area that was much stronger sunlight, and it was hotter, but the sun exposure was very strong. It doesn't make sense that two Caucasian people walking around naked with their private parts being exposed to the sun, they're liable to get hurt from sunburn and injury. And so God is not going to put people in those situations. He put people who were more protected from the sun with their skin. Caucasians came to those areas later, but after people put clothes on. So they were protected. People, sometimes things is just logical sense, but racism, white supremacy, and these things, and just because we've heard it and we don't want to do any research, get in the way of common sense. All right, let's look at this last area here. What is melanin? People think they know what melanin is for the most part, but there is a little more information on it. Okay, melanin is a natural substance that determines the color of hair, skin, and eyes in people as well as animals. Special cells called melanocytes make melanin. Everybody has the same number of melanocytes, but some people make more melanin than others. If these cells make just a little melanin, your hair, your skin, your eyes will be very light. If your cells make more, then your hair, your skin, and your eyes will be darker. The amount of melanin in your body also depends on your genes. If your parents have a certain amount of melanin, you could have the same amount and a similar skin tone. So, where is melanin in the body? The deepest layer of your skin, the parts of your eye, including the pupil and the iris, your hair, part of your inner ear, and areas of your brain, adrenal glands. Now, there's different types of melanin. This is where a lot of people don't know. The first one is eumelanin. So you pronounce it, drop the E, you pronounce it eumelanin. Okay, so eumelanin here, this is the one that makes the darkness in your hair, your eyes, and your skin. So eumelanin is what we know, what we mostly think about. it determines how dark or pigmentation the person's going to have, or the lack of eumelanin will produce a very light skin. Phenomelanin colors the pinkish parts of your body, such as your lips and your nipples. Red hair results from the presence of equal amounts of phenomelanin and eumelanin, while strawberry blonde hair comes from brown eumelanin and phenomelanin. Okay, so, and then the last type of melanin is inside the brain. I'm not going to deal with that because it doesn't have anything to do with our physical appearance. So, as we talked before about those genes, it determines how much of this darker skin tones you will have, and also the colors of your skin. Your eyes, if it has low amounts of eumelanin, will turn out blue or hazel in those areas. It's not as much that you have those colors, it's the lack of eumelanin which allows the eyes not to be brown but to be one of these colors. Caucasians are the only ones that pretty much have different hair colors. Now, this is, unless of course you go buy a box and change it yourself, but it's because of less eumelanin within the hair, and you get variances depending on how the mixture between phenomelanin and eumelanin. Most people in the world have darker hair unless, of course, they go buy a product to change it. And brown eyes are typically more prevalent within the world. You'll find some black people who have, or brown people who have blue eyes, but it's very, very rare. But that would indicate that the skin has a higher level of eumelanin, but their eyes, for some reason, doesn't. All this is genetics. And again, it doesn't mean that anybody else is important. But white people were not first. There's no reason for white superiority or white supremacy. That doesn't mean white people are not valuable or cared about by God. Everybody is cared about by God. But we have to stop allowing white supremacy to rule because it has there's nothing valid about it. And it has not only conditioned our world, it has poisoned the churches as well. That people are white supremacy in the churches and they use that to dictate and control doctrine. All right, so we're going to wrap this up here. All right, so we've talked about what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to carry a little farther. But I want you to first understand that if we are to make things better in this world, we have to start talking about the truth. And the first people in this world were African people, people of who looked darker, who were medium brown type people. And we'll talk about where it went from there. But there were no white people in the beginning. That doesn't make me as a human being less valuable. It just means I wasn't first. Well, as long as there's still food later on in the line, no one cares about it in the lunch counter, and maybe you're a little hungry. And maybe if everybody's had some share, you might even get an extra portion. Who knows? This idea of being first all the time is just ridiculous. We're all human beings. The only reason it's mattered is because some people wanted to have domination and power over other people. We are all God's children. Now, we can choose to be illegitimate children and run away, or we can choose to be with God. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. I hope that you'll come back the next time and that we can have some more talk together. Thanks again for joining me on the first episode of American Christian or Christian American.